Good evening. My question for you tonight is when you communicate with others, are you communicating to be understood, to share a message, or are you just communicating for the sake of sharing ideas? And this is all interesting because different people have different perspective on communication. So let's see, we're going to a quick sound test. So that's beautiful. So tonight we will discuss three perspective from the learner, from the teacher, and from the leader with respect to communicating, because our environment, our home environment, family, our workplace, our society is all led by communication. We have communication through social media, communication through the phone, internet, and indeed going and meet people so we can chat and have fun with them. So the idea here is how do we communicate? And it's important to actually share to others how we communicate, how we like to communicate, but also for people to learn that there are different ways to communicate depending on your audience. And one expression I'm going to share later on is when you communicate, you need to read your audience. On this, my name is Alain Faber, and I've been teaching for more than 25 years in high school. Was a geologist before that, and I have this podcast here for discussion of some of our ideas, but also raising some ideas and questions. And I hope that if you have any questions or ideas, that you could put them in our comment section. I'm always looking forward to reading what you have to say. So let's see. When we communicate as a teacher and teaching language, because I teach French in high school, I always share with people that the first thing we need to do is to be able to learn vocabulary for two reasons. One is to be able to understand the message that comes to us. But second is to be able to communicate by putting together a message so that other people can understand. And for the learner's part, if you think of someone learning a new language or learning science or learning to be part of a new team, the whole idea here is when you communicate, we've got to have a purpose. And everybody involved need to know what the purpose is. So for example, yesterday was Halloween. There's been great get-togethers. We'll go with friends. We have great chats. And the purpose of meeting with people is actually to communicate and have fun and share ideas. This is a great way to communicate. It's a great way to get better at communicating. But if you are in a place where you need to create messages to be understood, for example, if you're at school and you're learning science, language, or others, if you're part of a team and you need to learn how to do things, but you need to communicate with your other teammates, your team leader, and also as a leader, there are ways for communication that is very important to keep in mind. So let's see what are the three things we're going to look into tonight: learner's perspective, teacher's perspective, and leader's perspective. So for the learner's perspective, too often if I take a classroom, for example, or I'm in a training session, and you look at participants, you have people that are there to learn something. So the idea here is people get in the room, they talk with each other, they just say things so that they can feel comfortable, and then the trainer or the teacher comes in. So the whole idea here is you need to be able, as a learner, to understand what are the key aspects of what we want to do. Can you see here this little spider coming down? Nice. I think I'm going to just put it a bit further. There you go. I'll see you later. So there you go. So as a learner, you go into a room and then you are ready to learn. But once you start getting into the learning mode, then you are looking at how is the teacher talking? How do they stand? How's the trainer talking to you as a learner? So what happens is that the learners are projecting how they feel in the situation. So the first part of communication is often non-verbal. And then from there, a good trainer, a good teacher will ask necessary questions, bring some ideas in place so that it will create a situation where communication is possible. Because if you want to make a group comfortable, they need to feel that they can say something. They need to learn that they need to know that they feel that they are safe, that they can share ideas, but that if they are sharing, they will be understood. So here, from the learner's perspective, the communication aspect is, first of all, you need to know that the person talking to you understands you so that you can open up to let the information come in. Because if you are not ready to learn, what will happen is that you're going to have a mental activity and then no information will come through. I see that in the language class where we share vocabulary and conversation dialogues, and then people have seen the same thing for several days and they still have difficulties. Science class is the same thing. And that's why if I am, for example, I had a lab yesterday. We had the day before, we took time to look at procedures to make sure that they knew what we were to do tomorrow. Yesterday, there you go. And then the day of the lab, we reviewed the procedure again. So what happens is if the first day the learner was not ready, then they knew that, okay, lab day is important. They need to set the tone for being able to learn something. So if they miss it the first day, they can get it the second day. And it's important because not all learners are receptive at all time. So here is important. And as part of a teammate, so if you're part of a team, that's the same thing. You're learning ideas from the group, and the whole idea is, do you feel comfortable to receive the idea from the group? Because any team member that wants to get involved in a group, the best way is to listen so that you have a better understanding about what the culture of the team is all about. So there we go. So good. The second reason why I want to talk about communication from the learner's point of view is that in my communication technology class this week, we talked about emails. And so on Friday, I told them, okay, I would like to, told them there's a few things I needed to know from them. And I needed to have a professional email from them. And the purpose for that is I wanted them to send me an email with a purpose. So we tried it on Friday. It was great, but there's so many things that they could do better. So yesterday, when I asked them to do their second professional email, after the time on Monday, we spent time to look at what is a good email, a good professional email. Yesterday, we looked at examples. Then their second email they sent me was so much better because the learners need to learn that when they communicate, for example, in a classroom setting, or if you are a team member and you want to send an email or communicate to your team leader, you need to write your email with purpose. And often students and trainees need to know there's a difference between communicating for the sake of communicating, verbally or on social media, and communicating with a purpose. So that's quite different here. Because when you are communicating with a purpose, often you are asking good questions. You are bringing content and information that is valuable to the situation, and there's respect that is included. And that's something we can learn. And I think that too often people forget that a good email that is professionally written can go a long way. Now, I say that because if I have 60 students, actually I have 70 students this semester, or close to 70, and what happens is if each of them send me an email, I want them to send me an email with purpose, not an email at 1:30 in the morning saying, oh, I won't be able to present tomorrow because of that, because I'm tired or I have not started my project. So the whole idea here is when there's a communication and it's open, communication with a purpose, that goes a long way. And that's important. On top of communication, we need to learn about deadlines. The reason why communication is there is to make sure that deadlines are understood and that they're followed. And there's nothing better than great communication to make sure this happens, regardless if you're part of a project, regardless if you're part of, let's see, a training. If everybody involved in the training, in the team, in the classroom are all aware of the expectations and the deadline, then communication can happen with a purpose. You're not asking random questions. You can plan ahead. And that's why I think thinking of communication works well and from the learner's perspective. And that brings me to my second point tonight, which is about teaching. Because as a teacher, communication is very important. And what happens is that if you don't take communication seriously, then what happens is that your learner, your trainees, or your team members may not take you as seriously for that. So, for example, since the beginning of the semester and every semester, I always send email communication to parents and guardians, and I include the student's name in the emails. And what I do is that I share some information of what we've done in the last week or two. I mention what was given back to the students, what was marked, so that the communication can happen between the parents and guardian and I, as well as the students and I, and students and parents. So it creates a situation where communication is open with a purpose. Now, if you're part of a team and you're a team leader or a trainer, what happens is you need to be able to communicate so that everybody in your team is aware of what is the purpose to be there. Because once everybody knows what the purpose is, what's the main goal of the team, what is the project, what are the deadlines, what are the goals to achieve, then it's so much easier because by keeping the communication open, that allows everybody to say, okay, I know what I have to do. I know I'm here. Let's see what we can do together. And as a teacher, what is interesting is I do prefer, as an introvert, to have very good, detailed, and professional communication. Because having communication just for the sake of communication as an introvert, it takes energy. Anyway, that's my perspective. It may be different for you where you love to be able to chat, to send messages to everybody. For example, when I go online on social media, I can go for 15, 20 minutes, but after that, it drains me because it's not easy for me to get involved in such interaction. However, if I am in a classroom, then it's so much easier because together, the class and I, we set up the objectives of a classroom. If we have some learning to do, some reading, some collaboration, some hands-on activities, if people know what they have to do, then we are focused on a common goal. Because communication can be so many different things for different people. Therefore, having very specific communication helps. And that's why I like to email as much as I can my students. Trainers will communicate with their trainees as much as possible. Team leaders will communicate with their teams. That's important. It's interesting. I was listening to on TikTok. There's a few salespeople, and they talk about how to manage teams and so on. And one person was saying that it's very important as a team that you keep the communication open. But when you talk to your team, you have to figure out, okay, what are the key expectations we need to talk to make sure that nobody's wasting time. Because the time wasting is people feel it and people don't like it. And that brings me to the third topic I wanted to talk to you about today, which was about leaders. Because in some ways, and that brings me this idea of that salesperson. He was talking that a leader, when you want to talk with your teams, you need to figure out, okay, you need to set the tone for the communication. So that means that you go to your leader and you say, okay, you need to tell them what has been done so far, what were the expectations, and these are things, questions you have for them. And if there are things that are not quite working well, then you ask your leader, okay, what do you want me to focus on? What do you want me to prioritize on? Because too often, if people have too many goals, too many things to do, then you lose focus and then it's very hard to achieve things as well. And it's the same thing in my classroom or as a leader. You can be a leader of a family, leader of your classroom, leader of different ways. If as a leader, as a teacher, you have clear expectations, then it's easier for everybody. The only thing that for me is interesting with an increased communication, because I've been using checklists quite a bit to make sure everybody is aware of what's happening. I find that a lot of students and people that I work with, they follow checklists, and therefore If the expectations are the checklists, I find often that averages in an evaluation, for example, or on a project will be much better than maybe 10 years ago. 10 years ago, often I would have an outline of what I wanted to do, and therefore the students could show me what they could do. So if I have someone that was a B student, then they would be a B student. And to be an A student, then you would have to show initiative to be able to show what they knew. And that's something that has been changing, I think. And it's interesting. I've been reflecting on that and see how it goes. The projects are very good, the ones I receive, because I have checklists of what I want them to do. And the question is are the students as good as they are because of the checklists, or are they as good as they are because of who they are? And it's probably a mix of the two here, and it's very interesting to think about when you are a teacher. And indeed, as a leader, communication is very important. And something that I always keep in mind is that emails or professional emails is a great way to have a good paper trail of what's happening. A paper trail that outlines the situation, information that is important, and then resolution of the situation. So, all in all, the whole idea of communication is important, but everybody involved need to know the purpose of the communication. So I'm sharing tonight my preferred way of communication, but I do know, for example, in all my classes, about midway, I give everybody a 5-minute break. And you're going to say, why would I do that? Then I realize that having someone focus for 75 minutes is not possible to start with. And then if I teach a second language, and for some of those students, it's the third or fourth, they cannot focus on that language for 75 minutes. And I did realize that by giving 5 minutes break in the middle, it allowed me to relax. It allowed them to relax. It allows them to chat with people in the classroom. Conversations are amazing because people talk about what we learn, about what's happening in the community, in our school. And it's a great 5 minutes to have an uncontrolled, not let's say, an uncontrolled communication. So people, you can see waves of ideas. Often people laugh, jokes happening, people are helping, new ideas are being shared. And I think that makes a big difference. Because in some ways, you need to be able to enjoy the communication if you want to be able to go to the next level. And that brings me to the end of this podcast today. And my whole idea today was the idea that if we're communicating, we are communicating with a purpose for the sake of sharing a message to be understood. And that can be read in many ways. Conversation just for fun, for ideas, and just to be with friends, make new friends. It could be in a setting where, as a learner, you want to have clear communication so you know what to expect, what is expected from you. As a teacher, same thing. You want to have clear communications to avoid any situation where people don't know where to go and what to do. But as a teacher, you also need clear communications about the expectation of the environment of the school. And indeed, as a leader, as part of a team, or even team members, the whole idea is communicating for understanding. So everybody is in the same, actually aiming in the same direction. We might think about things differently. We may do things differently. But if the communication is clear, then together we're all going to mingle. But if we go in the same direction, we come at the end, we're all happy to communicate successes. On this, have an excellent day. Thank you very much for being here about this podcast on communicating with the message to be understood. And I'll see you next Wednesday at 7:30. Take care. Bye-bye.